What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to take a look at some Insomniac franchises and discuss if they'll ever come back or if they're gone forever. I thought this would be really fun to do, obviously right after Spider-Man, and Insomniac is such a talented studio that I think you could see the talent years and years and years ago, and I actually love so many of their franchises. I've talked quite a bit about the Resistance franchise, a personal favorite of mine. My God, that franchise is incredible, and we're going to bring that up in this video. But they've become a Marvel kind of powerhouse, right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I've been somewhat against it in the past. I still kind of am, and my simple reasoning has always just been they're great. They're great at what they do. I don't want them limited to just one thing. And that one thing, granted, they can do Spider-Man and Wolverine, and maybe they do other things in the future, but to just do Marvel, right? And I would like to see them get back to some of their older franchises / brand new ones. You know, Resistance was a new IP at one point. Ratchet and Clank was a new IP, right? You can't have them become franchises if you don't come up with them in the first place. So there's three I want to talk about: Ratchet and Clank, Resistance, and Sunset Overdrive. And I actually think each of them are in a very different spot from each other, so I thought that would make for a good video. Let's start with, again, my personal favorite in Resistance. This is how I came into the scene of Insomniac, or at least knowing who Insomniac was. I actually had played Ratchet and Clank games before it, but getting the PS3, I got the PS3 in June of 2009, and actually in the bundle that I got the PS3 in was MotorStorm, which is also a great franchise, as well as Resistance, and I loved it. I loved Resistance 1, loved 2, even though 2 was very, very different, and really adored 3, and I remember being, online, IGN, Podcast Beyond and stuff, when Resistance 3 came out. I think it's a phenomenal franchise, and I definitely want it to continue. Now, actually, Colin Moriarty, formerly of Kinda Funny and also IGN, he's talked about Resistance in the past where Insomniac had actually pitched a Resistance 4, and it was turned down because of the post-apocalyptic setting, and they deemed it too close to The Last of Us. That's how long we're going, and that's when these pitches were kind of taking place. So, number one, that's really cool, I think, history. And number two, it does seem like Resistance is dead, okay? The thing that makes Resistance different, I think, than Ratchet and Clank and Sunset Overdrive is this is the long shot game to come back. I think Ratchet and Clank has so much more likelihood of returning, and even Sunset Overdrive, which, we'll get to those two games in a second, I think they have way more likelihood of coming back. Resistance, the thing with Resistance that I've said numerous times, I've made videos just on Resistance, they never sold. They did terribly in terms of sales. And, Insomniac is a powerhouse now, and, games that they make obviously sell, bazillions, and, more realistically, they're kind of like system sellers even, right? Spider-Man. But the thing is, it's because I think of the property. I think Spider-Man, obviously the quality is there for sure, but it's Spider-Man. Spider-Man is selling PlayStations, obviously, right? Resistance, I don't know how much, because Insomniac's making it, I don't know how much that would actually help it. So I'm actually sad in saying this part of the video because this is my favorite of the three, maybe even the four. I truly love Resistance. I don't know, maybe not more than Marvel Spider-Man 1, 2, and Miles, but it's probably pretty close, okay? I really do want Resistance back one day, but I really think this is the one that's just not going to happen. It never really worked in terms of sales. I think, though, first-person shooter, multiplayer, components to it, great story, great characters, great, the Chimera and all that stuff. It was so good. I think that would work. And if you're looking for well, what can they do down the line to kind of combat Call of Duty? Why don't you bring back the Killzone and Resistance? You had two. You had Killzone and Resistance. You had some of them, and they never obviously were as big as Halo or obviously Call of Duty, but they were still good, at least in my opinion they were, but this one has the least likelihood. Moving on to number two, let's talk about Ratchet and Clank. So Ratchet and Clank is obviously, again, in its own unique spot for a couple of reasons. Number one, we just got one. I want to make sure, I don't come across as really stupid to some people. I understand we just got a Ratchet and Clank game. Follow me through here. As I said in the beginning of the video, my sense is that they're a Marvel studio going forward. So I understand Ratchet and Clank actually has more entries in it than any of the other ones we're talking about, including Spider-Man, right? It's been around the longest, it's had the most entries, and we actually did just get one a little while ago, okay? And it's a great game. It's an absolutely great game. With that being said, I still get worried that we won't get another one, or at least for an extremely long time, because where I see it going is Wolverine, Spider-Man DLC, maybe a Venom spin-off game. You could always do like a Miles Morales 2. You could obviously do Spider-Man 3, which they will. You could do another Marvel game. They're doing the multiplayer game, which I also still believe is a Marvel game. The point is, right, where did you hear Ratchet and Clank in that? And I know I only listed 5, 6 games. That's like 10, 12 years, right? Like, games don't come out I mean, Insomniac's fast, don't get me wrong. They're extremely quick, but games don't take a year to make, right? So when I say Spider-Man 3 or a Venom spin-off game, yeah, I can list those fast, but like they would take 2, 3, 4 years, even the smaller ones, 2 or 3 years to make. When are you going to do Ratchet and Clank? I think this would return because it's so ingrained, even though I think Resistance is what, I guess maybe not. Ratchet and Clank is probably what put them on the scene. Resistance is what put them on the scene for me, okay? I think Ratchet and Clank is so well known, and it's so well known that it's Insomniac, right? I think those two, like, you know, are connected in that way. I can't imagine it being gone forever, so I want to eliminate that part. When could we see it next? I think it's going to be a very long time. I got to be honest. Like, I don't think it's dead. Resistance, 10 years from now, if you told me, Alex, there's still not a Resistance game, I'd believe you. And I would say, yeah, that makes sense. Ratchet and Clank, 10 years from now, you could also tell me there's not a game, but maybe one's coming out in the next year or two. Like, I could see there being like a 10-year gap between the one we ripped apart and then the next one. And, you know, that disappoints me a little bit. That goes back to my central message. They're so good. I love all their games. And don't get me wrong, I want to play Wolverine. I want to play Spider-Man 3 and a Venom game or whatever. But I'd like to see, you know, Resistance, Ratchet and Clank, all that stuff mixed in a little bit. Kind of like GTA and Red Dead, like, give me a bully every so often, right? But regardless of that, third and final game, Sunset Overdrive. So Sunset Overdrive obviously is that, like, it's not like the ugly stepchild, but it's definitely the one that maybe you don't even remember that Insomniac made. It was during a really weird, again, history kind of period where Resistance 3 came out, and it was received well, and I loved it, and the multiplayer and all that stuff, but then it kind of bombed. It didn't sell, like, at all, and they, again, maybe they pitched 4 during that time. Sony rejected them, and they bolted, and they go to Xbox, and they make them Sunset Overdrive, and Sunset Overdrive is the foundation, really, to Spider-Man in terms of the mechanics and moving around the world. A lot of Spider-Man, 2018 at least, came from that game, so highly important game in the Insomniac backlog. So what happens with that franchise? Well, I got to be honest, I don't see it 2 almost ever happening. Maybe I would put it higher, like a Sunset Overdrive 2 is more likely than a new Resistance game. And by the way, Resistance from Insomniac. Hopefully maybe somebody else can come in. It doesn't need to be Insomniac that makes Resistance, just give it to me. But I do think, you know, there's a small possibility. The more possible outcome, though, is a remaster or is like a PS5 port. Now, remember, at least from my knowledge, Insomniac has Sunset Overdrive. Like, that's Insomniac's in terms of, like, ownership. I think that's right. I'm pretty confident in myself when I'm saying that, and I have seen some back and forth that maybe Xbox does still have something to do with it, but at least from what I understand, I'm pretty sure Insomniac can, you know, go forward with it. Now, maybe it jumping from, say, well, if you do a remaster and then you make it only PS5, whereas the base game is obviously on Xbox, like, does that, how badly does that mess things up? Maybe that's what's holding it back, right? But that's the point. I do think, like, I really do. I think we're going to get, at some point in our lives, a Sunset Overdrive remaster / you know, like, next-gen version. And I think it deserves that, to be honest with you. In terms of, you know, again, do you ever continue it going forward? I mean, I really just don't see it happening. Again, maybe like a 2, 3, 4% chance, higher than Resistance 4, but still very, very low, and I would say lower than, say, Ratchet and Clank coming back. So hopefully you guys like this video. I really wanted to make this, and I had a lot of fun recording it. So let me know what you think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.